Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And guess what? More Scorsese. You're just going to be stuck with this until April. And I'm going to make that joke every time I start the show. But this week, we have my friend Ben here from SiftPop, who is going to be joining to talk about Cape Fear this week. So, Ben, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's always a pleasure.
And you may shamelessly plug whatever you would like to shamelessly plug for the audience.
Well, if you like what I have to say on this episode, then please go on over to Ben Davis Movie Podcast, which you can subscribe to on any podcasting platform that is available to you. I do deep dives on movies, and I started to do reviews probably around March of this past year, and it has been a lot of fun. I love doing the reviews.
And I had a lot of fun deep diving Forgetting Sarah Marshall. So go check out that episode specifically.
That was a lot of fun.
I don't know how many podcasts will talk about Forgetting Sarah Marshall as long as we did. But there you go. So we always get things started on this show with coming attractions. And this is an interesting week, seeing as one of 3 movies actually coming out this week got pushed back. So maybe I'll talk about Cyrano another week. But basically, we only have 2 options. So, Ben, which one did you pick to talk about?
I picked the Lost Daughter or My
Yep.
Lost? Yes, The Lost Daughter. I know nothing about this movie. I'm gonna be completely honest. The only thing I know is that Maggie Gyllenhaal is directing this film, and it has a lot of buzz around it, especially for it being an awards contender and her being a Best Director possible nomination. So I'm interested to see what that is, and I'm interested to see if she gets nominated and if she's deserving of a nomination. I mean, she's an incredible actress. Her work, I mean, my goodness, she is the unsung Gyllenhaal sibling. We all talk about Jake Gyllenhaal. Not enough people talk about, yes, as they should, but not enough people talk about Maggie. She's an incredible talent, and I'm looking forward to seeing what she does behind the camera.
Which is funny because I just rewatched Far From Home today. So got a little Mysterio in my life. But this is starring Olivia Colman, who's coming for another Oscar. So I think that's another thing and I think Dakota Johnson in this film. And I also noticed that Maggie Gyllenhaal's husband, Peter Sarsgaard, is also in this film. Because there you go, keep it in the family. But the other film that's coming out this week, because Lost Daughter's coming out on Netflix the day this drops this Friday, and Jockey is coming out actually the day after we're actually recording this. So this is a Wednesday release, and this is a new sports drama starring Clifton Collins Jr., who is a pretty recognizable character actor. I know most recently he popped up in a small role in Nightmare Alley, but I think his biggest role was in Capote that came out way back when with Philip Seymour Hoffman in it. And for those who love Scott Pilgrim, he is the other half of the Vegan Police, along with Thomas Jane.
Yes.
There we go. But Clifton Collins Jr. is finally getting that big leading role. He's playing an aging jockey who finds out he might have a son, and he's dealing with like nagging injuries and all the lovely things that you need to have in an aging athlete sports movie. So I got to see this already, and the embargo is lifted because my review just came out as we were recording this video. But like, I thought it was a really, really well done film. It's a beautiful film. Clifton Collins Jr. is great. He is definitely a long shot to get nominated for Academy Award, but like, I'd give it to him. He was a really special performance, and you can tell this is like one of those kind of career defining performances. But you know, there's stiff competition every year, and I don't think he's gonna get nominated.
This year it is a 3-man race, it seems, and I don't know who's gonna win between Will Smith, Andrew Garfield, and Benedict Cumberbatch. I personally, from what I've seen, I would give it to Will Smith. But
I think after watching The Power of the Dog, I'm like, oh my God, Benedict Cumberbatch. But I still haven't seen Tragedy of Macbeth yet, because, you know, Apple, why haven't you dropped it in your screening room yet? I'm just a tiny bit frustrated.
When does that come out for us normies?
I think it comes out on Apple TV Plus January 14th.
Okay, that
So
has me
like,
excited. So I'll be able. I won't have to travel to go see it.
no, it's going to be streaming. And oh, Denzel's coming for that Oscar too.
He always
So
does, man. He always delivers. It's Denzel.
it is Denzel. So like, and that leaves like one spot open for somebody.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's going to be Clifton Collins Jr., but you know, I think he would have deserved it. But literally talked about all the releases for this week because very light week after the Christmas super week, seeing as we had 3 days last week with releases. That was a tough one. I had to choose like one movie out of like 11 movies coming out in the same week. But those are our coming attractions. And just in time for January, because that's always fun.
Yes.
Next couple of weeks going to be fun picking out things I actually want to go see. But now we're going to talk about our feature of the week, which is Cape Fear. And I always like to get started. So Ben, why did you want to come on for this specific episode?
So a while back, you were telling me about all the Scorsese stuff we're going to have to do a deep dive on. The reason I chose this one is because I really believe that this is his most underrated movie. We'll probably do some deep dives into it, discuss it, obviously, but it is very much an homage to Hitchcock.
Yep.
It really, really is. And I don't really hear, when you hear people talk about whether it's Martin Scorsese or Robert De Niro, you don't really hear them talk about this movie as much.
Mm-mm.
And I wanted to lend my voice because I really believe this is, I think, both of their most underrated movies. I really do.
It's very interesting because this is not really a genre you see Scorsese do a lot. And basically this and Shutter Island are the only like horror thriller kinds of things that you might see them do.
Yeah.
And obviously this one with De Niro and got nominated for Best Actor, which is
Yeah.
interesting, especially because, you know, who's the lead in this movie? But
well, who won Best Actor that year? Who was the lead of that movie? He's a supporting actor. I will argue that.
Are you talking about Anthony Hopkins, who's literally in a movie for 15 minutes
Yes.
and wins Best Actor?
How?
That is such an interesting. 1991 was a very interesting year at the Academy Awards because so Robert De Niro is nominated for Best Actor as a supporting actor because like he's the antagonist and it's obvious like Nick Nolte is the lead of this movie.
Yes.
And then Hannibal Lecter is a side character in a thriller about a different serial killer, but it wins Best Actor. And Silence of the Lambs beat Beauty and the Beast for Best Picture, which was the first ever animated movie nominated for Best Picture.
Well, it's interesting. I often talk about that year and the missed opportunity that the Academy had to nominate Terminator 2 for Best Picture. And I really think they should have. And you would have had Beauty and the Beast. The what?
I was just mouthing 100% because
Yes.
I am a T2 fanatic.
It's the greatest movie ever made, I think.
Hey, maybe James Cameron will win my present tournament and be the next director that I do a deep dive on his like 5 films.
Listen,
so
I will do any of those movies. You tell me, you let me know which one. I'm down for it.
I guess I have to do Piranha 3D then, because that technically is a feature film directed by James Cameron. But yes, T2 Judgment Day. 1991 was a very interesting year.
Yeah,
and
very tough year.
Let's put some context here too. This is a year after Goodfellas. So he goes from Goodfellas, probably his most iconic movie to most people, because like I feel like most mainstream audiences, you think Scorsese, you think gangster movies, because Italian people. And this comes afterwards. And this was 100% an obligation because of The Last Temptation of Christ.
Yep. And
he had to do this movie.
Now, wasn't it Spielberg that told him he should do this movie?
Well, it was interesting because Scorsese turned down Schindler's List and Spielberg turned down Cape Fear. And they kind of just switched.
Huh.
Which I'm trying to imagine Scorsese Schindler's List.
I mean, Scorsese, it's going to be great.
Yeah. And like Steven Spielberg said this movie was too dark for him. So definitely wasn't too dark for Scorsese. Because
Well, look, I've often said this. There are great movies that I will never watch again because they are so disturbing or dark. Schindler's List is that kind of movie for me. I've watched it once. I don't never need to see it ever again. And I think Spielberg doing Schindler's List is probably a little bit more personal to him.
yeah,
So I think him doing Schindler's List probably it made it a better film because it is personal to him.
yeah. And I think Scorsese made this as personal to him as possible by making it an homage to a filmmaker that had such an influence on him, because he even got Saul Bass to do the opening credits of this movie, who did many of the opening credits to Hitchcock films. And you could feel it. I remember sitting and watching this movie and the score going on in the background and the opening. I'm just like, wait a minute. Like, is this a Hitchcock
the opening,
movie?
it's so chilling. They don't have to show you anything. It's just beneath the surface. It's bubbling beneath the surface. It's the symbolism of it. Scorsese is such a stylish director.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to do much to be stylish. He's not in your face with it, but it's just that bubbling underneath the surface and that score. It's haunting.
He will zoom in on your face to show it, though.
Yes, he will. And that I'm probably skipping ahead, but I was watching the movie last night, and I was watching it late at night, and I'm sitting in my wife is asleep. It's dark in the room, and when the screen goes white and you just see the eyes, I got chills. I was like, I'm scared. I'm not going to front.
Couple of negative shots in this film were very bold and interesting choices, and definitely felt out of like a Hitchcock kind of film.
Yes.
And the erratic and crazy editing and the shocking close-ups and framing and different angles and everything, it's very much like this is an explosive, haunting film.
What allows you, the way that it's directed and the way that it's edited like that, allows you to really get into the psyche of these characters, because they are being tormented by was it Caddy?
Max Cady.
Cady.
Depending on which actor says his name in the movie.
I know. Cady, when like he is like an oppressive force over this entire family, and the way that it's shot and edited really lends to you really being able to get into these characters' shoes and feel the way that they feel.
There's a paranoia about this film.
Yep.
And speaking of great character introductions and how that camera moves and cuts on Cady in his cell and showing off all the biblical tattoos that he has, it's the Bible and something else on that scale just covering his whole entire back, and him just working out and like gets off, and you just see this chiseled Robert De Niro, which from what I saw, like they had him get that ripped because like Nick Nolte's like half a foot taller than him.
He's a bigger man.
Yeah.
Nick Nolte's a bigger man, and Robert De Niro, he's known to be imposing, but it's because of his personality.
Yeah.
It's not because of his actual stature. So they had to do something like that. And Nick Nolte got slender for the movie.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because like one of my personal favorite De Niro performances, it's obviously not one of his most nuanced, but like him as Al Capone in The Untouchables, all those upward shots of him where he's just like a towering force in the film. It's like you do that to get that perspective, and him walking out with that like Terminator sky in the background.
Yes.
And him just walking into the camera.
It's that storm that's about to come into your face and come into your home.
Yeah.
Your personal space. And that's exactly what he does.
And I'm a huge fan of, I don't even know if they put out content anymore, but like I used to watch Cinefix all the time on YouTube, and they had very interesting top 10 lists, because it wasn't like 10 movies, just a plain old list. It was like categorized, and they had a whole bunch of honorable mentions and everything for each one. But they had best movie monologues. And tied was Al Pacino's Fan of Man from The Devil's Advocate, and Max and Robert De Niro's monologue of I am like God, God is like me. And like that whole entire thing, because if it's one thing that I've learned from watching all of these Scorsese films is religion is a part of everything.
Yes, he is a very religious man, and he's not afraid to dive into his questioning of his religious beliefs. Obviously, by the end, we always know where he stands. He's still very strong in his faith, but he's not afraid to really dive into his questioning of his beliefs, which is normal.
Last Temptation of Christ. Whole movie.
The whole entire movie.
And this is so interesting because Katie sees himself as some kind of vengeful spirit.
He acts like one.
Yep. And trying to punish Bowden for screwing him over and not doing the right thing and not doing his job. And that's the thing. Do we even like Nick Nolte in this movie?
He is I think the way that they wrote him, and Scorsese did this on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
When I was doing the research for the film, Scorsese read the first little bit of it and said the family was too perfect. We need to do something with them. We need to make them more dysfunctional. And I think ultimately Nick Nolte, his character, what's his name again? Forgive me.
Last name's Bowden, I forget.
Yeah, Bowden. The thing about Bowden is that I think ultimately he's a good man, but he's a very flawed man.
Yeah.
And, with infidelity and that being a thing with him, whether it's actual physical infidelity or emotional infidelity.
Just having fun.
Yeah, just having fun. Sure.
Sure, guy.
Sure, man, sure. But I think ultimately he is a good flawed man. I think we can go back to the evidence that he hides, which is, and that's what I think is so interesting about this movie. It is kind of a Me Too movie in a lot of ways. Because you notice that when this movie came out in 1991, he hid that evidence that she was a promiscuous girl.
Like that should make a difference.
Right. Like that should make any type of difference. But he knows what that kind of connotation is going to do, because ultimately this movie is about the failure of a system that will not protect this family and will not imprison this man for life. Like, this guy raped a 16-year-old and he got off with just, what was it again? It was battery?
It was like battery or something. And like he served 14 years in prison for something horrifying. And like we didn't have to see it. We just know because we do see what he does to that young clerk.
Yep.
That was horrible.
I forgot about that scene when I was watching it last night. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh God, oh no. Because it like the way that it's played, and the actress, she made the decision because initially she was supposed to be fighting like as soon as she gets handcuffed. What makes it more unsettling is that she's playing along. And then it's that quick turn of it's going to hurt a lot worse than this. And then like he breaks her arm.
And bites her face. And that method acting decision of De Niro to shave down his teeth and mess up his teeth for this movie. I'm like, man, like it's disturbing. And then again, going back to what I said about the Me Too stuff, she will not press charges against this man because she says, I've seen this all too much, but I'm on the other side of it. And I know they'll see that I was drinking, they'll see that how I was dressed, how I was acting, and they'll just make fun of me. And then also her saying, I don't want to make you have to, talk to your wife, which at that point, that's when you do question, are you actually a good person, Nick Nolte? Because and Jessica Lange, who I think is probably the most morally straight character in this
Yeah.
film. And Jessica Lange was a great choice too to have as the wife too, because she's such a great actress and she embodies that personality when she calls him out on his shit. Just like,
Yeah.
come on, guy.
Yeah.
And because like you have Juliette Lewis who plays the daughter, who that casting's great because she plays such great edgy like teenage characters and natural born killers.
Yeah.
Whole other thing.
Yes.
And but like she is such an interesting choice here, and she's what happened to her? Like she still pops up and stuff occasionally, but like I don't think when she became like an adult, I don't think she continued to get these kinds of roles. But like she has to do some heavy lifting and some very uncomfortable scenes in this movie.
Yes.
Which first off, from like a filmmaking perspective, is so great as she's like slowly walking through, and that's like straight out of a horror movie. Like her walking through the backstage and walking up, and all you see is his legs crossed, sticking out like the little doorway, and you don't see his full figure, and he's sitting there smoking. And oh God, so uncomfortable.
I was like, I kept fidgeting. Like I was like, oh, I can't. I'm so uncomfortable. And it's even more uncomfortable knowing that they shot this scene 3 times and it was mostly ad lib between them. And it's the thumb in the mouth. Ugh. Like, it's so dreadfully uncomfortable. And it's more uncomfortable than what they were, and more horrific than what they were going to go for, which was a chase scene initially.
Yeah.
And then they decided to do it this way, and it worked so much better.
Well, and because he's obviously playing off of the rambunctious, rebellious nature of her, because he's like the cool teacher kind of thing, and like showing an interest in her. And like she obviously doesn't get along with her dad and has some daddy issues. And like this older man coming in and doing some nasty things.
Yeah.
And because the thing is, like, how old's De Niro in this movie?
How old is she?
Because like what's De Niro? De Niro's in his 80s. Like he's like 40.
He was in his 40s, I'm pretty sure.
And it like just the look of him too, with like those messed up sharpened teeth and like that slicked back hair and just all the tattoos and everything.
The accent where he talks like this, I'm not doing a really good job at it, but I'm trying to. Yeah, it's like, ugh.
Yeah, and speaking of his accent, towards the end when he's like drowning and just yelling out, like I couldn't even understand what the hell he was saying.
He's supposed to be speaking in tongues because he's supposed to be levitating to God, is what he's saying to himself, I guess.
Yeah. And it just, his performance is so uncomfortable and so committed. And there's just a presence about him. Like even when they first show him in that movie theater, which of course they're watching Problem Child with John Ritter, which I owned on DVD a long time ago.
It's a childhood classic for me. I haven't seen it in many years for a lot of reasons. I don't want to ruin it for myself.
Yeah, that giant cigar in his mouth. And what's so terrifying about him is he's smart.
Mm-hmm.
He did all that homework in prison, and he's playing games, and he's toying with them. Because the thing is, he could just straight up kill him whenever he wanted. It's very obvious that he can get where he wants to get to, and nobody's really going to do anything about it.
What's better, to do that or to torture him for however long? It's all about power for him.
Yeah, and Nick Nolte is such an interesting choice because like this is one of those things where it's like, I guess, playing on expectations, because Nick Nolte is the kind of actor that would get riled up.
Yeah.
And he plays that. And he, like the whole thing at the parade where he's taunting him and Nick Nolte like attacks him, and then he plays like, oh, how'd you do this to me?
Yeah. Lucky I don't sue you.
Yeah. And that whole entire thing, and just playing on that game with him. And because Ben, have you seen the original Cape Fear?
I have not in a long time. I think I saw one scene from it. It's Gregory Peck. It's black and white, is it not?
Yeah, which that's the thing. 3 of the original actors are in this movie.
I noticed Gregory Peck.
because Gregory Peck shows up for that one scene as that lawyer. And this is his last film, sadly, before he passed away. And then that one police lieutenant is Robert Mitchum, the original Max Cady.
Ah, okay.
Which Robert Mitchum had a streak of Cape Fear and The Night of the Hunter, which is a film I absolutely love, where he played some despicable, horrible people. And him having that presence in this film with his like really deep, like Robert Mitchum voice, and where he's like really alluding to like Nick Nolte should take things into his own hands, like, I don't think you're understanding me.
Yeah.
And where he's just like trying to back up, but you know exactly what he's trying
to
refer to him.
I wouldn't say anything like that. I wouldn't tell a citizen to take the law into his own hands. He's like, oh, Nick Nolte's like, oh, okay, sure.
Wink, wink.
Yeah.
And Martin Balsam, who's a great old character actor, is the judge in that scene. So like having the three of them all in that sequence together is so interesting. And that's like, you know, Scorsese's a student of the game.
Oh yeah.
Like people talk about Tarantino and all of his movies being like he loves film and you know he's a student of film. Scorsese's like I felt Scorsese feels like one of the first filmmakers that was a student of film and really started making a career for himself. And you see it in all of his films. You feel the French New Wave influences. You feel the Fellini influences and things. And obviously this whole entire film, he plays off like Hitchcock. And it's interesting because you brought up how you feel like this is his most underrated film. I don't think this film gets enough credit. And like for me personally, a couple of weeks ago, we had to watch The Color of Money, which both of those are studio films that he made. And I love The Color of Money. And even when it's like
Newman his Oscar, right?
It did.
Yeah.
Which was very interesting, but like fast that because like I'm a huge fan of The Hustler too. And Newman's just
Paul Newman, man.
Paul Newman.
Yeah.
And this is so interesting because I always like thinking about the context of films when I'm thinking about this, because like this is a year after Goodfellas with De Niro. De Niro comes back for Casino. And then he's not in a Scorsese film until The Irishman. So this is like that tail end of him being Scorsese's muse before he finds a new one in Leo.
Yep.
And this is such an interesting film because like next week I'm doing The Age of Innocence, which for anybody that goes around saying Martin Scorsese just makes gangster movies,
he just does gangster films and he hates on superhero films, which by the way, he never hated on superhero films. He just said what he views them as.
And I've definitely shared my feelings on his comments and stuff like that. But like, if anybody is trying to use like attacking Martin Scorsese's filmmaking abilities, you're just wrong and should just stop. You go home. You're drunk.
If you don't like Scorsese as a director, that's fine. You know, movies are subjective, but like he is, Leonardo DiCaprio said it. He's still doing punk rock. You know, he's still doing his thing. You look at something like Wolf of Wall Street. That is a incredibly fresh, stylistic, frantically paced film. And I think it's one of the best of the decade.
And he was what 70 something?
Yeah.
At that point? Like,
yeah. Like
that film's almost 10 years old at this point.
Yeah. It's right around the corner from being 10 years old.
And he's still making them. And like, what's so special is going through all these films and hopefully getting to see the Killers of the Flower Moon this year. Hopefully that actually comes out this year as he's filming it. But like, he's still going.
Yeah.
And the fact that like, this is decades into his career at this point, and he pulls out something so different like this is crazy. Because like this is a disturbing film.
It is. It's one of those movies where I think we were talking about it a little bit before, but I watched this for the first time when I was probably around 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. And I didn't really understand the context of everything. I really enjoyed the movie, but I didn't, obviously, being that young, you're not going to understand the full context of stuff. Watching this like through adult eyes now, I do think that this is the most disturbing movie that he has done, more so than Taxi Driver, which is also a very disturbing movie, and the stuff that he does. And I think it's because there is no sympathy, there is no empathy for the Katie character at all. There's nothing. He is just pure evil.
Mm-hmm.
And he is like this spirit of vengeance. You said it perfectly. This spirit of vengeance that is just always there, hovering. And the relentless pressure that this movie has as you're watching it, because of the way that that is conveyed through the incredible direction of Scorsese. Now, it does get a little like loose at the end, I think.
It's one of the reasons why I don't think this is one of his greatest films is because it does kind of just fall into that thriller kind of tropes and cliches towards the end of the film as it goes on. And like, there's nothing particularly fresh about the plot of the film.
No.
You're pretty standard kind of like, it does make I think the more interesting choice of like, because like you could build up that tension and mystery about who's doing this to this family, but no, Katie's in your face.
Yes.
And he's in every character's face. Mm-hmm. And he's smarter than everybody in the room. Like when he gets in, like, was it Don Baker? Like he catches him following him.
Yep.
And like pays for his drink or whatever. And like he's a step ahead of everybody when he pulls up to the house and he has a dog collar. And he has these face-to-face confrontations with all of the characters in this movie because he's not afraid to hide it because he plays the system that got him. Yep. And now he controls the system and understands it and plays it off for his own advantage to keep toying with them. But like, yeah, especially towards the third act where it just gets like full blown, like how many times did they straight up kill him?
Oh my God. Well, like the thing that bugs me the most about the movie where it starts to kind of fall off the rails. Like I still like the third act, but it is far less like it's far less stellar than the first two acts. And it falls off the rails for me when the lawyer reaches for the piano wire and touches the murder scene stuff, gets all the blood all over him and everything. And you're just like, oh my God, this guy's a lawyer and he's doing this. Why doesn't he just say, this guy was murdered in my house. I didn't do it. I was asleep with my wife. We found him.
Yeah. And like
the number one suspect at that point.
And then he goes on the run. And of course, the cops can't help him now. And they're all on their own. Katie latches onto the bottom of the truck.
Which I had questions about. And I was like, oh, come on. But then I saw the belt and I was like, okay, maybe.
And then he shows up at the boat. And like, it just turns into full-blown insanity at the end of this movie. They burn him. That doesn't kill him.
Comes back out and is holding everyone at gunpoint. He doesn't have. I thought Nick Nolte was tied up at that point. He wasn't.
Yeah, there's definitely like choice things to keep the tension going and stuff like that. And you know the whole big thing where Nick Nolte's going to smash his face in, but he gets washed away. And then he's like that last shot where he's just like
staring at him as he's sinking down into the bottom.
Yeah.
And now it is a scary shot. I'm not going to lie.
Yes.
It makes me unsettled, but it's not, it doesn't let Nick Nolte win. The movie doesn't. He doesn't win at the end of this. No one really wins.
Nope. Like Evil is Dead. That's about the winningness that we're going to get out of this movie.
Yeah, when it's Evil is Dead, but what happened? There's no redemption for what has happened to us. We will forever deal with this, and that's kind of what what's her? It's Juliette Lewis. Juliette Lewis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What she says Like at
Mhm.
the end, we can't live in the past, but we won't ever speak of this ever again.
And it's definitely one of those kinds of things where it's just like similar to I love Color of Money, but like it's not like a particularly interesting and nuanced plot to it. It leans like that's a sports drama and leans into like the rivalry and stuff like this. This leans into the thriller stuff like that. And sometimes sticking to a predictable arc makes something more rewarding. I have so many feelings and thoughts about Gangs in New York that I'm going to talk about in about a month because that's a particular film that does completely subvert itself in the third act. And that's where I think it kind of falls on its face a little bit. But like, this is the kind of thing where, like, you can tell Scorsese's like, I love me some Hitchcock. I'm going to go crazy because like crazy Hitchcock finale, and like it does feel like a crazy
There's some
Hitchcock
great
finale.
camera work in that third act. There really is. The twisting of the camera to
Yep.
convey what they're going through in the boat, the crash. Yeah, it is a all over the place third act, but it works, but it's just not as good as the rest of the movie, which kind of clings to realism. The third act just kind of
Well, and it was the moment where Katie's like, I've been training for this, and has the flare like burning his hand and everything. I'm like, this man is superhuman.
well, speaking of superhuman, remember when he gets beat with a lead pipe and
Cut
then
across his chest and
yeah,
everything, and he's
and
still alive.
then beats up the three guys. I'm sorry. I don't care how tough you are. You get hit with a lead pipe like that many times, you ain't getting up.
This is when it's like this man really is a spirit of vengeance. And
Yes.
this is
The
a superhero movie.
superhero origin. Counselor.
Max Cady is 100% a supervillain
Yeah,
in this
yes, he
movie.
is. He
Because
is.
realistically, he is.
He's like the
And
Joker, except worse somehow.
oh, and that outfit though, when he does get beat up, that white cap, the like whoever does like put Katie together, um, how much of it was De Niro, how much of it was Scorsese, costuming, all that stuff. It just this is an iconic villain, and it works so well. And
He does.
that's the thing. What's the most memorable part of this movie? Max Cady.
Yeah.
Nobody's remembering Sam Bowden.
No, it's a very understated performance.
Well, and that's interesting because I saw on Wikipedia that Harrison Ford was their original choice for Sam. And he said he would only do the movie if they let him be Max Cady.
Uh-uh.
I don't know how that would have went. I
I
also saw Steven Spielberg apparently wanted Bill Murray as Max Cady,
I could see that.
which I'm like, that would have been interesting.
Yes.
Or even like, this is like 10 years too early for us humans to deal with Robin Williams being like a psycho killer. But like, that would have been something interesting because, like, with like Insomnia and 1 Hour Photo, it's a
He
whole
is
other thing. But like, this was such an interesting choice for De Niro. And yet 10 years, like 8 years later, Fearless Leader in the Rocky and Bullwinkle movie.
It is crazy to think about that is 10 years. They're 10 years separated from one another.
That's 4 years after Casino.
Oof.
Which that's such an interesting thing because I did start looking at De Niro's filmography, and when he stopped working with Scorsese, there is a large gap there in his career where like he was definitely leaning into comedy, and he was doing like the analyze this, analyze that.
The
And
Meet the Parents stuff, which I still hold true that I love the first two Meet the Parents.
it's like, I have nipples, Greg. Can you
I
milk me?
have nipples, Greg. Can you milk me?
But
You
like,
tried to milk them too, didn't you, you sick son of a bitch?
which the thing is, De Niro can be really funny.
Yes, he can.
And it's interesting that what really brought him back was being in Scorsese-esque films. Because, there's a few directors out there that like really feel like they're trying to be Scorsese. I feel like David O. Russell is definitely trying to channel some Scorsese, and that was the thing. De Niro started working with David O. Russell and
Yep.
had Silver Linings Playbook, his small role in American Hustle, where he played a gangster again, and Joy. And it made me really happy to see him actually like acting again. And then he had The Irishman, and then he had World Grandpa.
Well, see, I will say The Irishman at the start of that award season, he was getting a lot of buzz, but then it quickly faded away. But honestly, he probably was the best part of that movie, especially the last 30 minutes.
He really shouldn't. I'm going to say this for forever. They should have used a body double.
With the kicking, yes. Yep.
Because or
it doesn't work.
Do a different shot.
Yeah, because
like have that high angle shot.
That's a 75-year-old man doing a kick. You can tell.
Yep. But that was a very interesting thing because like De Niro just disappeared during award season, but you know, he's back again. He's going to be in Killer of the Flower Moon. Leo is, Jesse Plemons, John Lithgow, Brendan Fraser. Just like, I'm down for this. When's this movie?
Brendan Fraser is having a comeback. He's having a Fraser-sance.
And the internet loves it.
I do. I'm a big fan of it.
So, but I guess, Ben, do you have any other thoughts that you wanted to share about Cape Fear?
Well, I do want to reiterate, I do think that this is probably his most underrated film. It's not a perfect movie. I think the first two acts are perfect. Mm-hmm. I think they are. The third act kind of falls off the rails a little bit. It's still good, but it doesn't really hold a candle or a flare to make a little pun there to the first two acts. But it is a really well done movie, and it's incredibly disturbing. But I think ultimately when I think back to this movie, I think of Charlie's Angels 2 Full Throttle with Justin Theroux mocking this performance.
Oh my. Well, I actually am going to cut back to your candle reference because you just gave me a segue that I cannot help but jump on. But I second everything that Ben said. And if you haven't seen this Cape Fear, definitely go check it out. I've never seen the original, so I definitely want to go back and check it out. But I wrap up the show with recommendations. And before I let Ben do his one recommendation, I have one of my recommendations. Speaking of candles, so it just so happened like I've caught up on screeners and stuff like that, and I've been trying to watch some movies on my ever-growing watch list that has over 100 movies on it.
Oh dear God.
And I spent 3 hours and 8 minutes today watching Ingmar Bergman's Fanny and Alexander, which is a Christmas time movie, so it did feel pretty fitting. This is such an interesting drama that's very personal and deals with a young boy coming to grips with like his father passing away, dealing with a very strict stepfather. And at the beginning of the film, it's a beautiful film. And it's like takes place in 1907, and it's this beautiful Swedish Christmas, candles everywhere. Candles on the tree with tinsel. And I'm sitting there like,
fire hazard.
People are going to die. And then my fiance, who's like super into like weird facts and history and stuff like that, it's like there was a lot of people who burned to death in those times when people had candles everywhere. And I'm like, if somebody's going to die in this movie, not to spoil anything specifically, but I think Fanny and Alexander is one of the greatest cautionary tales about having open flames in your home. I'm going to leave it with that. It's a great film besides that. 5 out of 5 stars anyway. But if you're trying to teach somebody a lesson about having open flames in their home, sit them down for 3 hours and 8 minutes and make them watch Fanny and Alexander. But Ingmar Bergman is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, and this is a very interesting finale for him because I think this was his last film in 1982, but it's definitely an investment. It's on HBO Max right now. I watched all 3 hours today, and thank you, my wonderful fiance who actually sat through the whole entire movie with me. Uh, but Ben, what's your recommendation?
So I'm going to recommend something I've just seen recently.
Mhm.
I decided to go with something I've seen recently, and I've seen a lot of stuff recently. But I'm thinking of stuff that's not Spider-Man. Spider-Man No Way Home, obviously everyone loves it. Well, not everyone, but most people do love it.
Yep.
I was trying to think of other movies that are out in theaters right now that I've seen that I would want to recommend that I don't think are getting enough love. And I think The King's Man is that movie for me. I went into this movie with very low expectations. None of the trailers really worked for me. I love the first Kingsman. I really, really enjoyed the second one. I think it is a romp. Like, it is just so much fun.
It is that cheesy 80s Bond
It
turned up to 11.
Well, see, the first one builds to that. And then the second one, they got you introduced. So they don't build to that. They just throw it at you.
Throw it at you.
Yeah. And with this one, with The King's Man, it's been delayed so many times, I didn't really know what to expect.
8 release dates later.
Yes. It's been a lot of times it's been delayed. And so I walked into this movie with very low expectations. And I'm going to be honest, I thought it was quite good, very entertaining. I thought Ralph Fiennes was terrific. I thought he stole the show. Well, Rhys Ifans, or Ivans, however you say his name, amazing.
Rah Rasputin, lover of the Russian queen. Yes.
He is so good in this movie. I didn't even recognize that was him.
Yeah, right?
I thought it was Peter Stormare. Honestly, I did.
And then when it was made in the 90s, that 100% would have been him.
I thought it was him. And then I heard him speak, and I was like, that's not him. Who is that? That's the Lizard. Also, it's the kicker from The Replacements. He's wiry. he's an amazing actor.
I'm not a Mick. I'm bloody Welsh.
Yeah, he's an amazing actor, and he's terrific in this. But the thing that I like the most about this movie is it is 3 different movies in one. So it's partially like a historical piece that is like not really a historical piece, but then
it's like historical fan fiction.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, and then you get into the 1917 portion of this movie where it's very serious and it gets very, very dark too. But then at the end, you kind of get the Kingsman romp, and kind of in the middle too, they throw in the stuff with
Rasputin.
Well,
that's the thing, because like I enjoyed this quite a bit, and I will watch this again. It definitely had an identity crisis.
Yeah,
because like there's definitely moments where it's like, oh, this feels like a Kingsman movie. Matthew Vaughn remembered he was making a Kingsman movie. And there's other points where it's like it's a pretty solid historical fiction.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, what if you had like World War I Spectre messing with what's going on and causing World War I with an obnoxious Scottish accent?
Listen, I will say I did not care for the villain reveal at all, especially because it was so telegraphed. I hated it.
You know what's funny? I called that within like a couple of minutes of said character showing up on screen. I'm like, I don't trust this person.
Yeah, same. And that's the thing that didn't really work for me that much. And also the identity crisis that you speak of. Now, yes, it did work for me, but it makes for a confusing movie. But I think the thing I liked about it the most was that it's a really, really good father-son movie.
Yeah.
It's a really good father-son movie. And it's about the error of being too protective sometimes.
It's, you don't let your kids do anything in high school and then they drink too much and get food poisoning in college. That's like, that was the equivalent of this movie, except with much higher stakes.
Yes.
So it's like, Ralph Fiennes is fantastic. I thought Harris Dickinson did a fine job in this movie. It's hard not to compare him to Taron Egerton because it is a Kingsman movie. And like Eggsy's a much more charismatic character, but like, what's it? Because it's the dad's Orlando. What's the son's name? Don't remember. because it's Orlando Oxford, and then his son. But like it's a genuine relationship between the two of them, and I didn't expect the level of seriousness that a lot of the film had.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that, and it worked pretty well. I do have to give special shout out to the Tom Hollanders of the movie, all three of them, playing the three cousins, which two of them were much more reserved. One of them was a clown.
Yes.
And like, why didn't they have Daniel Bruhl in any of the, like, he had no spotlight at all in like any of the marketing for this movie.
He was just there, and there is a nice little cameo in this that I was hoping would play out a lot bigger than it did. I was hoping this person would be a prominent feature in the third act. He wasn't, but
yeah. And I guess if they make a sequel to this, I guess they would. I don't know what, but I have to say, when they introduced that obnoxious Scottish accent, I'm like, can this please be David Tennant? And if this isn't David Tennant, I'm going to be really disappointed. And thus, I was very disappointed. Not to get your hopes up, there's no David Tennant in this movie.
I was hoping it would be, and forgive me, I've been so bad with names recently, just ridiculously awful. He's the actor who plays the Bond villain in The World Is Not Enough. He's in Once Upon a Time, the TV show, and he's in The Beach.
Oh, what? Robert Carlyle?
I think that's his name. That's who I was
from Trainspotting.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been great too.
That's who I was thinking.
We're just going to keep disappointing ourselves by going with other people we wanted this to be.
Yes.
That would have been great too. But not to say who it turned out to be isn't a good actor. He is, but it was just obvious.
Very.
Yes, Tywin Lannister was in this movie too.
Yes. Yes, he was.
Charles Dance is just great. But yeah, go check out The Kingsman. Definitely didn't make any money.
No.
In Spider-Man land. So go show it some love. I have two other quick recommendations. One I think we might talk about a little bit more too. But one of them, this film is one this was in early virtual cinemas at the beginning of this year. And I decided to not dive too deeply into the actual virtual cinemas where they came from the indie theaters and they cost like $10 to $15 a piece to rent. I waited and waited and waited and waited and waited until this actually came out on Amazon, which it's $3 right now. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. This is a little foreign language film called Asia. And it's an Israeli film. And it's about a mother and a daughter. The daughter is the young actress from Unorthodox, that show that kind of blew up on Netflix a bit. And the mother never was ready to be a mother. She's a career woman. She works in a hospital. She doesn't have a good relationship with her daughter. Her daughter's out and about, hanging out with skateboarders and, doing teenage girl things and being an angsty teenager. But when her health makes a turn and her mother actually has to step up and be like a real mother to her, it becomes a really powerful film about standing up and becoming what you need to be, and also the sadness about potentially losing out on what you thought life was going to give you. And it was a really powerful little drama. So I'd recommend it. It's out there. It's like an hour and 25 minutes too. It's
a quick watch. I might have to watch that.
And then the other thing, which I will be recording podcast right after this for, is rewatching Drive. And 10-year anniversary specifically is why it was a 2011 film.
That makes me feel sick.
Because I remember buying this on DVD, only hearing about the buzz, not really knowing much about it. I saw the trailer, and that trailer made it look like a Fast and Furious movie. Yes. And I popped this movie in. I was at my grandparents' house where I lived. I was the only one around that night. I was watching it by myself and just got absolutely blown away by what this movie turned out to be. And I've tried to love other Nicholas Winding Refn films. Only God Forgives, Neon Demon didn't quite do it for me. Yeah. I still have never finished Bronson. I need to go back and finish that with Tom Hardy in it.
Quicker, 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 quicker.
Yeah. I've literally only watched half the movie, and this was back in college. And I was watching it with my fiance now, Jess, and we'd never finished it. But Drive is an incredible stylistic art house crime thriller.
Yeah.
And it has such a somber love story in it. It has one of the most killer soundtracks.
That soundtrack is absolutely amazing. Whether it's the opening song,
Night Call by Kavinsky.
Yeah, Night Call, yes, and then you get the Under Your Spell by Desire, which Kid Cudi did he took that track and made a song called Teleport to Me, Jamie, which is an incredible song. Love Kid Cudi. And then of course Be a Human Being. The movie's, it's so cool. It's so freaking cool.
I wrote cool so many times in my article that I wrote about it, because like this is like the definition of cool.
Yes.
How can you be cooler than this movie?
You got Ryan Gosling and prime Ryan. Let me rephrase that. Ryan Gosling is always in his prime.
This is so like there's a couple different kinds of Ryan Goslings that you get in movies.
Yes.
You get the quirky, weird Ryan Gosling, which is my favorite because apparently that's actually how Ryan Gosling is. He is a weird dude. And like the Nice Guys, that is him being quirky and weird. And then you have the Ryan Gosling from Crazy Stupid Love and The Big Short, where it's like, what's with the New Balance? Are you in a fraternity? And just like that kind of like controlled like confidence. And then you have the stoic loner that he's in this, Only God Forgives, Blade Runner 2049. Like this is that role that kind of defined it for him.
And that's kind of my favorite Ryan Gosling. Although I do love the quirky Ryan Gosling in The Nice Guys, I think this is my favorite Ryan Gosling. This is why I initially, after watching this movie, before Ben Affleck was cast as Batman, I wanted him as Batman. I was like, he is it. I could see him standing toe to toe with Henry Cavill before I even thought Ben Affleck would be great too.
And then Ben Affleck was bigger than Henry Cavill, and then you're just like,
yeah. Ben Affleck is a big man.
He sure is.
He's like 6'4" and got freaking jacked for Batman. But
yeah, but like Drive is a special kind of film, and Carey Mulligan's great. You have Oscar Isaac, who pops up for like a good 10 minutes or so in this movie. And then you have the great veteran supporting cast of like Bryan Cranston, who is great.
Ron
Perlman is Nino.
Yes.
And Albert Brooks is legitimately, no joke, one of my favorite villains in any movie.
Chilling.
Because this is Marlin from Finding Nemo. This is the comic relief from Taxi Driver. And the funny other guy in like broadcast news, and like he's a comedic actor. You would not know that by watching this movie.
No.
Because he, like, I think the moment you realize what he brings to this role is when he meets the driver for the first time and he puts out his hand and the driver's like pulling his gloves off, like, I got a little dirty on my hands. Like, so do I. And it's just like that kind of just, I'm like, damn. Yeah, that kind of presence. And he got nominated for a Golden Globe. Where was his Oscar nom for Best Supporting Actor?
Where were the Oscars for this entire movie? Like, this is my favorite movie of 2011. It besides it being cool, I think there's a lot of just great subtext about this movie that you could really dive deep into, because it's not one of those movies that's very like, it's not exposition heavy. There's
not a lot of dialogue in this movie.
No, it's all character based and done so by, like you said, not a lot of dialogue, but by performing. It is an actor's movie. It really, really is. And it sings.
And it's interesting because the reason we're doing on our podcast is all of my friends who are in my movie club, for my podcast, we each nominated 2 movies from 2011 and then did a little tournament. We voted on it. And like Drive like killed it. Like nothing was going to compete against it. I think my nominations were The Descendants and Captain America First Avenger. But like I love The Artist. I think it's a wonderful film. Nobody's talking about The Artist 10 years later. Nobody's talking about Jean Dujardin 10 years later. Guy beat George Clooney, Brad Pitt, and Gary Oldman, and somebody else who I feel bad that I don't remember who the person was right now.
Well, it's like, I always say this. I love the Oscars, but they often do get it wrong.
Well, and this definitely was not a film that I think most Oscar voters were checking out. And now it's like, I want to know how many Drive posters are hanging in people's, specifically guys' rooms all around.
I wish I had one. In fact, I wish it were behind me instead of episode 1, which you do get a nice shot of Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul. So
we get some Liam Neeson's right there.
Yes.
But so if you haven't seen Drive, watch.
Absolutely.
But Ben, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on, chatting Cape Fear. We chatted a lot about The Kingsman and also Drive 2, because, you know, one needs some loving and one's like, you gotta watch it. Exactly. So, but Ben, before we wrap up, I'm going to let you shamelessly plug again, whatever you'd like to shamelessly plug for our wonderful audience.
So, guys, again, but before I even say that, Shane, thank you so much for having me on. It was a blast as always. I always love being on here. This is my second time on here, and I can't wait to be on again. And of course, I can't wait to get you on to Ben Davis Movie Podcast, which
absolutely
you can listen to at Ben Davis Movie Podcast. Again, searching at any podcasting platform that you have. We did an episode together, Forgetting Sarah Marshall. A lot of fun.
Now I want to watch that movie.
Love.
You need a psychiatrist. I don't want to go psychiatrist. Where's like Dracula the musical? Why haven't we still gotten that?
It's like taking a little holiday with Hitler.
And on that note, Ben, thank you again for coming on, and thank all of you out there for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.